Hello, hello.
Hey Janji, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. The sun is shining, spring is here in my part of the world after a long winter, so I'm happy. How about you?
Yeah, in the US, we've had quite a bit of wild weather in different parts of the country. So I think we're all enjoying the fact that things are warming up and we're able to go back outside and, kind of enjoy, being in the spring and getting to the year.
Oh, fantastic. Super.
Yeah, so excited to kind of be back with you again. So welcome everyone. This is the Own It or Quit It podcast, and today's topic is going to be one that's very timely for where we are in the beginning of the year. It's this whole idea of how do you really take ownership of your development plan? And then I think a lot of companies talk about development plans, but what are the elements, what are the components of a strong development plan? So what Johnji and I decided that we're going to spend time today talking about is what are those specific elements? So what should be included in a development plan? How do we think about our project, our daily work? How do we think about relationships with mentors, coaches, and traditional skill development, right? So in my mind, there's kind of three buckets of career development that can be built into your development plan. So what we decided to do today was just kind of walk through that. So, I think we always start with a little bit of a warm-up topic just for us, Junji, and I would love for you to kind of give me perspective on how do you see development planning? When is it strong? When is it weak? But yeah, like what's your reflections on development plans?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'm like anyone else. I had my moments when I loved doing my development plans and, moments when I absolutely dreaded it. It's interesting to look back those times, what happened when I loved it and what happened when I didn't. Now I'm working with senior leaders on their career acceleration and career transition. And it's fascinating to see how the same struggle is happening on a senior level, exactly the same that's happening earlier in our career. What should I put in there? It's a tick box exercise, it's all administration. I have to have it in the system by certain time. Shouldn't I just do my work? And, those kind of things. And since I'm helping people to accelerate their career, I got to think about this a lot, and I became a big fan of doing career and development plan really well in a meaningful way. Since you have to do it anyway, why don't you do something that is driving your actions? Why don't you strategize around it and make it bigger than what is actually expected of you? So I became a fan of development plans.
Yeah.
How about you?
It's so funny because it could become a checkbox exercise because if you think about it, usually at the beginning of the year, the company has a requirement that people have to complete a development plan, or maybe there's some sort of mandate from the top down that everyone needs to get it into the system. And I've been in companies where once you have that date of when it needs to be in the system, you just need to dedicate a little bit of time right before that deadline just to make sure no one sends you a nasty email saying you haven't completed your development plan, right? And that's when it becomes a checkbox exercise. I do think the role of the manager has a lot to do with it because if they spend the time to set it up and dedicate the time to be able to be thoughtful around building a development plan, then employees will see it as value. If the manager or the leader doesn't carve out the time to have those conversations and it's more of an email, make sure your development plan is in the system by this date, people will find it to be transactional because the manager set the tone for it to be transactional, right? So,
Indeed.
even when I talk to my people leaders, I basically tell them, you got a role model, and then I got a role model how this should be managed, right? Because it does flow from top down to some degree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant.
So, I think one of the things we always talked about is if there's these three buckets of development in the job, development through relationships, and development through skills. Like, how do you think about the balance? So, you've worked in HR, you and I have both worked in companies where we prioritize development in these three buckets. Can you tell us a little bit of like, the research behind it or the thinking behind these three buckets?
Yeah, well, so I'm sure many of us, the two of us definitely worked at a companies where we use the so-called 70-20-10 development plan. And I am sure that people who are listening us know exactly what we are talking about. Basically, the research actually quite back in time shows that biggest part of our development is actually coming from doing our job and doing activities, practicing stuff. 20%, according to this research, shows that 70% comes from developmental assignments, 20% from developmental relationships, coaches, mentors, inspiring bosses, learning from each other. And 10% is actually coming from actual trainings when you sit in a class. And those are actually really good for building new skills. But the 10%, the classroom style or a virtual classroom style training itself is not embedding the learning. You need to actually start practicing it. So the research goes back to quite some time, but actually I looked it up for this session that there have been numerous researches backing this up, contemporary researches by McKinsey, Harvard Business School. So this actually stands. There is debate about the percentage, but I think we are here not to kind of cement in those numbers. We are here to take the key elements of it, which is a huge part of our learning is coming from doing what we are doing,
Yeah.
practicing, mastering.
Yeah, I know when I first started the process of having development plans now, decades ago, right? I was always under the impression that skills, training, going to a conference, signing up for 3 or 4 of these virtual training classes was my development plan. I didn't even consider the job, the projects. I almost considered those to be my objectives. These are the things I need to accomplish for the business, but I didn't connect it to my development, right? And I was hinging on too many of these virtual courses to give me all the development, but there's a practicality of, are you practicing this stuff on the day, in the day, every day? And that is where you get the repetition. That's when you try new things. And, it was a big unlock for me when I started looking at my projects as development opportunities, as opposed to, only when I show up to a classroom for 4 hours or 5 hours at a time, I'm developing. And I think that's just an old way of thinking, right? So the proportion, you're right. It's not so much about being hard on the 70-20-10. It's the prioritization. Don't
Yeah.
assume all your development comes from in-class training because one, companies aren't doing it as often as they used to do, but also it's not the best way to learn because you're probably absorbing a lot, but you still got to find a way to do it, right? And I think the learning is in the doing.
Exactly. And, there is no secret that when you apply for a job within your organization or at another organization, you have to talk through what you were actually doing. The
That's
biggest
right.
part of a job interview is talking about your experiences. And the reason you're asked about those, because your future employer would like to make sure that you actually learned how to
Yeah,
do this. So, your trainings are still part of your CV, but if you kind of think about it, the biggest chunk of your CV are the lists of jobs you were doing with great details, and your trainings are coming towards the end. So, if you
that's right.
just want a visual aid where you should spend your focus in terms of development is doing your job every day, thinking that I'm
Yeah.
now demonstrating, learning those skills, mastering those skills, and demonstrating that I've learned them and I know how to do it.
So let's talk about that first element then, right? So Junji, as you think about that 70%, which is on the job projects, work experience, how do you find development opportunities in your daily work? So, someone's kind of realizing this for the first time, they now look at their list of projects. What's the guidance you give them on how to find development opportunities in those projects?
Yeah. So the number one choice you're making towards keep growing and keep learning is what job you're actually signing up for. And there are moments in our lives when we are changing job, or you might be applying for your first job or your last job. Think intentionally, where do you want this job to take you to? And sometimes, where you want to get to, that requires several steps. Sometimes there is one job that can give all that to you, but it's not only giving you the status, the right salary level, your ambitions met around that, those. it's also giving you tasks that are stretchy enough that there is always something new to learn. So I think if you're able to find a job where the big chunk of the job is something where you bring expertise. So actually, the organization benefits from having you there. But there is an element of it that actually you learn from them and you
Yeah.
walk into that job with that awareness that I came here to learn these skills.
Yeah.
That is a huge thing. That means that you're much more awake while you're doing the job. You know that you do this for the future. So I very much encourage my clients to think about their career ambitions and think about every single job as, an opportunity to master skills and keep track of that. So don't wait until your next career step or job interview to kind of dig back, like, what did I learn? While you're learning it, be aware, say, today, this is what I've learned. There are also micro opportunities to create yourself learning, on the job learning opportunities within the same role. You can apply for projects, or you
Mhm.
can just put your hands up for an extra piece of work, which is, obviously, an extra task on you, and it might be an additional burden. But consider this as investment
Yeah.
to your future. So I would say doing something that you haven't done before with the right help, and that's where I'm gonna throw the question to you, is actually going to give you the opportunity to expand and grow with the right help. So do you want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what that right help is and why is that important?
Yeah, I think just going back to that 70% projects and workload, I know when I was early in my career, I had a lot of projects that felt transactional. Like, I needed to create a report. I needed to go grab data from this location, put it into this table, then copy that table to a PowerPoint slide and send it to my boss. And I think a lot of us, early in your career, you're going to find yourself in those kind of repetitious transactional type of projects. Not everything is strategic,
Yeah,
right? And you can't
exactly.
ask for only the strategic projects, the ones that make you feel like you're working with leadership. There's some stuff where people just need reports and they needed to be generated. The way that I always think about this is, why am I filling this out and who's using this to make a decision? So I always forced myself to find value in even the most mundane tasks, because one, it gives me a little bit of fire and motivation of like, okay, if I don't do this, somebody's not going to have the data and somebody's not going to be able to make the decision they need to make. So why is this data important? Why am I pulling it? What is my manager going to use for it? And then what I actually do is, once I created that document, I would follow it to some degree. Like, where did it get sent? Okay, what decision was made based on this? And then I know when eventually I get to that seat and I receive the report, I can think through the decision that needs to be made. So even in the most junior roles, you just have to think about, what is the enterprise context for what you're working on? Like, why does this matter to the bigger organization? And then all of a sudden you start to find value in even the most mundane, I
Yeah,
build a bunch of PowerPoint slides. Why am I doing this? Well, it's actually to help set up the next leader for the decision. So it's actually a quite critical role, right? So I do think it's important when you look at your projects to think about development in that way, that there is no wasted time. You decide if it's wasted time. Like, if you don't extract value from it, then yeah, you're creating
yeah.
a table and you're putting numbers in it and then you're putting it in a PowerPoint and you're emailing it off. And if you never made that connection, then yeah, maybe it was a waste of time, but it doesn't have to be, right? And we could be in
Yeah,
control of that.
I absolutely love it. So practically what you're saying is that whatever opportunity comes in your way, and if you have to do it anyway, you're better to start proactively search for meaning in it and
Yeah,
turn that opportunity into your
that's right.
developmental opportunity.
Yeah.
So I love it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it naturally goes into the next section, which is the 20%. So you had talked about relationships. I
Mm,
actually learned that through a career mentor. So the 20%, now if you think about 70% of your job is the projects, the work you're doing on a day-to-day basis, 20% are those critical relationships you identify in the company. So obviously your manager relationship is one, but it's very transactional. And what you should look for is people other than your manager. So you should think about, a coach, someone who may be 1 or 2 years ahead of you that is a little bit faster or maybe has figured out some things and can coach you and help you think about your career differently. There's probably someone at your same level to some degree that can be someone you ask the stupid questions to. I think we all have this feeling of, I can't ask my manager that. They're going to judge me, but I don't actually know how to get started on this project. You can look at your peer set to identify how they approach it, and hopefully you have a work environment where people are supportive of each other. But I think that's important. And then the last piece of this is having someone that might be a senior sponsor at some point. And this might be later in your career, but you also need someone that's in the leadership team who knows you, who has a sense of wanting to see you succeed. But it's important to start writing down who are those relationships that you're going to build and who are those people that are going to help you think through these things. But yeah, I've always found this 20% actually to be quite impactful, especially when you find those right relationships. They may actually catapult your career, right? So
Absolutely.
every year you should be refining that list.
And not just refining that list, but think about whose 20% of developmental relationship you're gonna be.
Yeah,
So how
that's right.
you become someone who is helping someone to learn and grow. There is nothing more rewarding than that. And suddenly, if you do that, you learn a lot by being a mentor, being a coach as well.
I love that, right? And now it reminds me of thinking back to when I was an individual contributor and I had a desire to become a manager and lead people. I decided that I was going to take on a bunch of mentoring relationships to start practicing the muscle of
Mm,
people management, right? So no one gave
mm,
me direct line management. No one told me I'm ready to manage 3 people. But what I decided to do was find junior people in the organization and just mentor them because it
yeah,
almost practices your skill, right? So when you
yeah,
are given the opportunity to lead a team, you're actually pretty good at mentoring. You're pretty good at coaching because you practiced it, right? And we were at a company where sometimes people would invest in early talent because they have the potential to become people leaders. So let's teach them how to coach. Let's teach them how to be mentors. So I do remember early in my career, I had some junior people on my development plan that I said that I'm going to help them, and then it set me up for nice stories when the time came around to find the next people manager. I can give specific examples of
fantastic.
people I've coached. Yeah, it's a great point.
Excellent. Very good.
Yeah,
Super.
so we talked about those relationships. I think what I would say is that you want to make sure you're realistic about where you are in the organization and who those relationships should be. So if you are very young, junior in your organization, expecting the most senior person in your department to be your mentor might be a little bit too aggressive. You might want to look for those middle managers you really trust, those people that are further ahead in your career, but maybe not at the very top just yet. Because every year you're going to relook at this list. And as you get 2, 3, 4 years of experience, it gives you the permission to go higher in the hierarchy to some degree, right? So I think also don't be confused that just because you started a company, you can go ask the VP of marketing to be your mentor because the person may have 3 or 4 other people that are closer to their job that they're actually mentoring, right? So don't be undermined or underwhelmed by it, but you should be looking for people that are kind of in your proximity of your network. Does that make sense?
Makes absolutely sense. And what I'd like to bring in for those who are already more senior in their career journey, age-wise, seniority-wise, um, you may not want to look beyond the obvious that you're
Right.
looking for someone who is more senior than you. You know, the bottleneck is coming closer and closer, and there will be less and less people. I have been always very keen on working and being mentored by younger, more junior people. There is something super therapeutic about bringing fresh perspective and learning from those who haven't seen it all yet, who haven't done it all yet. It
That's
just
right.
kind of helps you to see the world with a fresh pair of eyes, and you would be surprised how much you can learn from them. So I'm very proudly always had reverse mentors, and I still keep in touch with them. And some of my most transformational developmental experiences were coming by books I got from them or information or teachings that I got for them,
Yeah.
especially in the digital space. So
Yeah, I think if you think about the generations that are in the workforce, right? The younger generation has a very different perspective of the work relationship, how to have an impact. They're a little bit closer to society in terms of wanting to have purpose and meaning. And a lot of
yeah,
times it's inspiring to have those mentors. So we talked
absolutely.
about kind of the 70%, the 20%. I think the 10% is pretty obvious. It's skills, it's training. So talk to me, Janji, about like what is the role of skill development and formal training in these development plans? Like how much
Yeah.
time should we be dedicating to it? How do we approach it?
Yeah, so I'm sure all of us were in that situation when you just needed to be told how to put one foot in front of the other. Like, when I descale my coffee machine, I need skill building. I need a YouTube video to teach me how to do that. That's another topic that every time I need to look at it because I don't remember 3 months time how to do it, but that's me. So, think about that when there is a new way of doing something. There is a new platform that you need to learn. There is a piece of technology. There is a new process that you need to learn. There is no way around it. You just have to sit and read or listen to get the information in and then go into discuss it with somebody or practice it and master it.
Yeah.
What I'd like to call out here though about trainings, this has been the kind of old-fashioned way of waiting for your organization to kind of roll out the training plans and apply for those trainings that are rolled out, which are brilliant. But I'm very big fan of creating our own personal development plan, which is company agnostic. Always think about what's your career aspiration beyond your current organization. Are you getting all the skill building, all the development that you need there? If not, pay for it yourself. I think,
Yeah.
that is something you're gonna thank yourself later. If you want to learn new skills, like, one of the contemporary topics in every profession that is being disrupted by AI is how to learn about AI. And I'm just having that conversation with one of my clients in a very senior position. That skill is not being offered in his current role. And he's going to go and find his own development there because, from a future employability perspective in his profession, that is absolutely an essential thing. So what
Yeah.
I like to encourage you that there is so much out there. Don't be blocked by your current job. In fact, always link your development plan with your future aspirations and make sure that everything that you're doing within the skill building, the developmental relationships, and the practicing is that it is taking you towards where you want to go in your career.
I really love that, Junji, because I think sometimes we assume the development plan is for us within our company in the current job with our current manager, and that's the scope of it. But you're right. It should advance you in your career in your organization that you're currently in, but it should also be a standalone thing that helps you regardless of what company you're at, right? So I think 10%, the way that I think about this also is what are the conferences I need to attend to hear from people that are not at my company? So I need to hear from competitors, industry leaders, whatever those things are to give me perspective. So I usually think about that in my skills. I do think about being able to take trainings and things like that that are offered by the company, but then also going out and finding trainings, like you said, in AI. Maybe the company that we're at is not developed enough to train you yet, but they still see the value in that, right? So anyone who has skills in AI and they bring that to the table, it's going to be incredibly valuable. It may be that the organization is not ready to teach you yet, but they value it, right? So then you going out and finding those, working with your manager to get that. And sometimes it's about finding a book that is really compelling, and then all of a sudden you have this unlock because you're more productive, you're more efficient with your time. Maybe it's time management, whatever it is. Those books matter, and then sometimes you just got to pay for it yourself because you're investing in yourself, right? So, yeah, great perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And, maybe one last thought on this that as I'm always advocating for linking your development to your career aspirations, it could be that your current line manager, your current environment is not supporting your career aspirations. It happens, right? They either don't have those kind of jobs or they don't see the X factor in you. That's fine. Don't wait. You can still do this. You can still finance it for yourself. Don't wait. Don't give all the power to your organization to
yeah,
influence your future. So take, it's agency over your own destiny.
yeah. And it's
And
ownership.
it's ownership. And, our podcast is all about owning it or quitting it. We would like to encourage you guys to really own your development, make it so meaningful that you can't wait to do it. And the only way it's going to be meaningful if it is really taking you to places where what is really important for you to get to.
That's right. So if I want to kind of put closure to this topic, I think the most important thing is if you're listening to us, you haven't had a chance to really think about a structured way to approach development. Really think about it this way, right? So 70% of your development plan is based on the projects you work on, the day-to-day interactions you have with, meetings, how you manage relationships, stakeholders, all those things are development. 20% are those key relationships you've identified, whether it's inside the company or outside the company. And then 10% is those formal skills, training, books you read, conferences you attend. But the proportion should be allocated in that way because if you find yourself that your development plan is contingent upon taking 80 hours of training and classroom stuff and it's not really tied to your projects and there's no people involved in your development plan, it's going to feel incomplete. And to be quite honest, it's going to feel transactional because you're just going to click through a bunch of trainings and get them done, but you don't have a place to practice them. You don't have a place to see what's true on theory versus practicality of when you're trying to develop these skills. So the balance is incredibly important. So, I know I work with my team on this framework of 70-20-10. I still think about my own development, even in the role that I'm in now in terms of 70-20-10, right? So I think it's incredibly valuable. So I guess, that's the homework for everyone is to go build that kind of plan, right? And, that proportion is important as well. So hopefully they find that
Absolutely.
incredibly valuable.
And make sure that it has a strategic direction aligned to your aspirations.
That's right.
And
That's right.
on that note, I'm gonna write my own development plan. Although I'm running my own company, it's even more important
That's
to
right.
have a direction where I want to grow. Do you have one? I'm
Yeah.
sure you do.
I
Yes.
do. I do. Absolutely, I do. Because I'm seeing things that I've never seen before. I'm in rooms that I haven't been in before. So I'm always constantly learning on the job. But I think there's also this idea of what is the role of AI? How do I think about it for my organization as a marketing person? Like, where's the
Yeah.
future of this? And that I
Yeah.
have to go externally to get that inspiration and find it out, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, whether you're in your first job or you're a senior executive, these development plans still matter.
Yeah.
So force people to give you prioritization of it, right? And do it for
Absolutely.
yourself. I think all of us we get busy, so we don't assign the right time for ourselves. So I think the discipline starts with us, right? Set aside two
Brilliant.
hours, think about it, and do it.
Yeah. Okay, guys, so own it and have fun with it. And let us know how it goes. Also, let us know if you want any topics to be discussed in the theme of development, because that's our theme for this year.
Yeah,
Thanks,
wonderful.
Jason. Lovely
Always good
talking to
talking to you.
you. And see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye then.